In the golden age of trucking, the chrome shop at every fuel island sold gadgets that would make a modern DOT officer reach for his citation book before he finished his coffee. Whistlers for the stacks, boots for the radio, and little switches that never showed up on any receipt. Nobody batted an eye. But those days are gone. Today, those same accessories are banned across most of the country, and in more than 30 states, some of them carry fines north of $10,000. We're counting down 15 banned trucker accessories that could end a career in a single roadside inspection. And number one is the gadget that beat the scale house itself, quietly for 30 years. Between the CB boom of the mid-70s and the electronic crackdowns of the 2000s, a whole industry grew up selling drivers tools the law never approved of. Some were toys, some were survival. One by one, the government banned every last one of them. Here's the full list, what each one did back then and what it costs now. Number 15, the Turbo Whistler. $15 at the Chrome Shop, and it made a tired old Cummins sound like a fighter jet spooling up on a carrier deck. It was nothing but a slotted piece of metal screwed into the exhaust stack, and when the turbo came up on boost, the whole truck screamed. Kids on the overpass loved it. Drivers loved it more. The trouble is that every state bans modifying an exhaust to increase noise, and the Whistler existed for no other reason. California went as far as writing whistle devices into the vehicle code by name back in 2003. Now, the ticket itself is pocket change. The real cost is what the ticket starts. An inspector who finds one toy in the stack has every reason to spend the next hour finding out what else is on this list, and that hour has ended more careers than the Whistler ever cost in fines. Number 14, smoked lens covers. Somewhere in the 80s, the custom crowd decided headlights and taillights looked better tinted dark, and the parts catalogs obliged with smoked plastic covers that snapped right over the lenses. On a show truck parked at the Truck Beauty Contest in Louisville, they looked sharp. On the highway at night, they cut light output below the federal minimums every lamp on a commercial vehicle has to meet. Inspectors treat an obscured lamp exactly like a burned-out one, and a lamp violation is one of the fastest routes from a routine weigh station visit to a full Level 1 inspection, the kind where they check everything from your logbook to your tread depth. Plenty of drivers kept the covers in the side box, snapped them on for the truck show, and pulled them off before the trip home. The smart ones still do it in exactly that order. Number 13, the train horn. Some driver, somewhere, was the first to walk into a railroad salvage yard, buy a set of genuine locomotive air horns, and plumb them into his truck's air system. God bless him, and God help everyone within a quarter mile. A real train horn pushes past 150 decibels, loud enough to cause physical pain up close, and the whole point of mounting one was to unleash it on four-wheelers who cut off a loaded rig. Nearly every state limits horn loudness, and many ban horns that imitate emergency or railroad equipment outright. The fine runs a few $100s a pop, but judges have no humor about them because a horn that sounds exactly like a locomotive blasted anywhere near a grade crossing can get people killed. It was the funniest accessory on this list, right up until it wasn't. Number 12, blue lights and flashing strobes. In the golden era, a driver's rig was his calling card, and the measure of a proud truck was how many marker lights it carried. A long hood Peterbilt rolling through the night with 100 amber chicken lights burning looked like a carnival coming down the mountain. The trouble started when drivers got creative with color. Blue is reserved for law enforcement in virtually every state in the union, and flashing or rotating lights on a commercial truck are restricted almost everywhere. A single blue pilot light glowing on a lower step is enough to get a truck pulled over from half a mile away, and the stop that follows never ends at the lights. Once an officer has a legal reason to walk all the way around the truck, everything else on this list is suddenly in play, including what he might spot through the window on your dash. Number 11, the police scanner. Long before smartphones, the scanner under the dash was the closest thing a driver had to inside information. It crackled with dispatch traffic, and a driver who knew the local frequencies could hear the bears organizing before the trap was even set. The catch is that listening to police radio from a moving vehicle is restricted or outright illegal in a number of states. Indiana and New York have had laws on the books for decades, and several others require permits no trucker ever held. For a commercial driver, a scanner discovered during an inspection invites one very uncomfortable question. What exactly were you planning to do with this? The old-timers will tell you it was just entertainment on a long night through Wyoming. The law never quite believed them, and the officer standing at your window won't either. Number 10. Limo tint on the cab glass. Every trucker who ever ran a southern route in July understood the appeal. The sun through that big windshield turns a cab into a greenhouse, and the aftermarket sold film dark enough to make the driver disappear entirely. But federal rules require the windshield and both front side windows of a commercial vehicle to pass at least 70% of visible light, far stricter than what most states allow on a pickup. Officers carry tint meters now, and the reading takes 10 seconds. The citation stings, but the out-of-service order is the real bill, because the truck sits parked until the film comes off, and a parked truck earns nothing while the payment clock keeps running. Peeling baked-on tint out of a cab in a scale house parking lot in August while your delivery window closes is a punishment no judge ever had to write down. Number 9. The television in the cab. When little portable TVs got cheap in the late 70s, they started showing up in sleepers all over the country, and nobody had a problem with that. The problem was the drivers who mounted the screen where they could watch it from the driver's seat. Federal Regulation 393.88 has banned exactly that for decades. Washington never cared what a man watched back in the sleeper. The rule was written for the driver's seat, and it was written so plainly there's no arguing with it at a roadside. Today, the same rule catches drivers who prop a tablet playing movies on the dash, and the violation lands on the driver's record and the carrier's safety score at the same time. Any old hand who ever passed a rig weaving in its lane at 2 in the morning with a blue glow flickering on the windshield knows exactly why that rule exists. Number 8. The GPS jammer. When satellite tracking units started going into fleet trucks, some drivers decided the company didn't need to know everything, and a little device that plugs into the cigarette lighter promised to make the truck invisible. What most of them never understood is that a jammer doesn't just blind the box in their own cab. It kills GPS for everything around it. The most famous case came out of New Jersey, where one driver's cheap jammer kept knocking out a landing guidance system at Newark Liberty Airport every time his route took him past the field. The FCC tracked him down and fined him nearly $32,000, and the case became the warning shot for the whole industry. Jamming any radio signal is a federal offense, full stop, with penalties that can climb into 6 figures for repeat violations. The tracking unit might have felt like an insult to a man who ran on trust his whole career, but that gadget in the lighter socket was a loaded weapon pointed at every airplane, ambulance, and four-wheeler navigating within a mile of the truck. Number 7. The export radio. The FCC gives citizens banned 40 channels and calls it a day. But the radio shops always kept something special under the counter. 10-meter export radios built overseas that looked like ordinary CBs and tuned far outside the legal band with the flip of a hidden switch. Drivers called the space between the bands the free band, and out there a man could talk for hundreds of miles with no traffic and no rules. The problem is that transmitting outside the authorized frequencies without a license is a federal violation, and the FCC's fine schedule for unauthorized operation climbs into 5 figures, with confiscation of the radio on top. Enforcement was always spotty, which is exactly why the free band thrived. But when the FCC did come down, it came down in federal court, not traffic court. The 40 legal channels were a party line. The free band was a private club, and the cover charge, if you got caught, could buy a very nice used tractor. If these stories are taking you back, do an old hand a favor and hit subscribe, because the back half of this list is where the fines stop being pocket change and start being the truck payment. Number 6. Regrooved steer tires. Rubber was never cheap, and a worn casing with a little meat left on it was money sitting in the tire rack. So shops ran a heated cutting tool through the old tread and carved fresh grooves into it, and a re-grooved tire could squeeze thousands more miles out of a casing that should have been retired. On a trailer axle, done right, it was legal and still is. The killer was putting one on the front. Federal equipment rules ban re-grooved tires from the steering axle of a heavy truck, because a blowout on the steer at 70 miles an hour gives a driver no second chance and takes whoever's in the next lane along for the ride. Inspectors at the scale know exactly what re-groove marks look like, and a bad steer tire is an out-of-service order on the spot, with the truck sitting until a real tire shows up at roadside prices. The couple $100 the re-groove saved was always borrowed, never earned. Number 5. Counterfeit inspection stickers. Every commercial truck has to pass a periodic inspection, and the proof is a decal on the door. Where there's a required sticker, there's a man selling fake ones, and for years that man worked truck stop parking lots from Georgia to California with a folder full of decals that looked close enough at 40 miles an hour. The difference between this and everything before it on the list is one word: fraud. A burned-out lamp is an equipment violation. A forged federal inspection sticker is a false document, and it unravels the moment an inspector runs the numbers against the shop that supposedly did the work. When it unravels, it doesn't stop with the driver. The carrier gets audited, every truck in the fleet gets a second look, and a pattern of fake paper can put an operating authority in the ground. The sticker cost $50. The inspection it dodged cost maybe $200. Nobody who bought one ever did that math out loud. Number 4. Magnetic identity signs. Federal rules require a carrier's name and DOT number painted legibly on both doors. And for an honest operation, that's just sign paint. But the aftermarket sold magnetic door signs a man could swap in 30 seconds, and in the wrong hands, those magnets became a disguise. A carrier shut down for safety violations could reappear the next week under a fresh name and a borrowed number, running the same trucks and the same drivers. The industry calls them chameleon carriers, and the feds have spent 20 years building systems to catch them, matching addresses, phone numbers, and VINs across every new application. The magnet itself was always legal. What was hiding under it was the crime. Getting caught running under a dead or borrowed number means the truck is out of service where it sits, and the people behind the swap are looking at federal enforcement, not a roadside ticket. Number 3. The glider kit. For decades, there was one honest loophole in the emissions war. A glider was a brand new truck, new cab, new frame, new everything, delivered without an engine, and a shop would drop in a rebuilt pre-emissions motor, usually out of a wrecked donor. It started as a sensible way to resurrect a good drive train. Then the DPF era arrived. New engines started choking and stranding drivers with Regan cycles on the shoulder, and the glider quietly became a mass production Dodge. A driver could buy a brand new Peterbilt with a mechanical era heart and none of the filters. The EPA watched tens of thousands roll out and slam the loopholes shut in 2018, capping production to a trickle. The gliders already on the road stayed legal to own, but California treats those old engines as unwelcome guests, and fleets that once paid a premium for them now find doors closing at ports and terminals. The truck that was built to outrun the emissions rules is slowly being fenced in by them instead. Number 2. The clock stopper. Here is the one they whispered about at the fuel counter. A toggle switch spliced into the speedometer cable behind the dash that put the odometer to sleep while the truck kept rolling. Flip it, and a 500-mile night officially never happened. Paired with a paper logbook, the clock stopper made a driver's miles match whatever story the book was telling, and on a leased truck with mileage charges, it quietly shaved money off the bill every single week. The federal government outlawed odometer tampering back in 1972, and unlike almost everything else on this list, this one lives in criminal territory, with civil penalties stacking next to prison exposure for a pattern of it. The engine computers ended the game for good because a modern ECM counts every revolution whether the dash is listening or not. More than one old switch is still wired into a museum piece, Kenworth somewhere, disconnected now. A little brass souvenir from the era when a man's miles were his own business. And that brings us to number 1, the scale cheater. In the golden era, when a load paid by the ton, the heaviest secret on a truck wasn't in the trailer. It was a valve. Air suspension made it possible, and certain shops made it real. A hidden switch in the cab that could dump air from one axle group and shift weight onto another, right there on the scale platform, sliding a few thousand pounds around until every axle read legal, even when the gross was anything but. Grain haulers, log trucks, and coal buckets whispered about the trick for years, and it kept whole regional economies rolling heavy through the same outlaw years. Hollywood was busy turning into legend. Today, it's finished. Inspectors know exactly where to look for unauthorized plumbing in an air system. Tampering with the suspension during a weigh is a violation all by itself, and the overweight fines the valve was built to dodge now scale by the pound, with a rig running $20,000 over gross, generating a single ticket well past $10,000 in states like New York and Pennsylvania. Weigh in motion, sensors buried in the pavement catch the truck before it ever reaches the platform. The little switch under the dash beat the scale house for 30 years. The scale house won in the end. Step back from that list and you'll notice something. Not one of those gadgets was invented for fun. Not even the Whistler. Not really. Every one of them was an answer to a squeeze. Freight rates that never added up honest, lease payments calculated to the mile, emission systems that stranded a man 1,000 miles from home, and long nights where a radio signal was the only company in the cab. The parts counter didn't create outlaws. It served working men who were improvising their way through a job that asked more than it paid. The regulations won, and the highways are genuinely safer for most of it. But it's worth remembering who built those highways business in the first place. One overloaded, underslept, whistling mile at a time. If you drove in that era, tell us in the comments what was bolted to your dash or hidden in your side box, and which ones we missed, because there are at least 15 more where these came from. And if these stories take you back, hit subscribe, because next time we're covering the cab-over trucks that vanished from the interstate, and the real reason drivers stopped sleeping over the engine. Keep the shiny side up.